source of life and cause of death. Water can wash away clues, dilute evidence, and conceal corpses. For investigators, water can be a cunning opponent. For criminals, a most accommodating ally. For the perfect crime, just add water. Nanaimo is the second largest city on the west coast of Vancouver Island in British Columbia. The picturesque harbor city is the backdrop for the brutal murder of a homeless man. The horrifying event shocks the peaceful community and will mark the lives of 3 adolescent witnesses. The youths will in turn be frightened, cooperative, and dishonest about what they observed. The 3 young witnesses could prove to be the biggest challenge for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigation. August 4th, 2008. A 13-year-old girl and her mother enter the RCMP detachment in Nanaimo. They have come to report a brutal crime. The young girl says that she witnessed a murder early that morning, and the body was then thrown into the water not far from the port of Nanaimo. Corporal Glenn Forsley is the lead investigator in charge of the case.
I received a phone call from my supervisor, and he had let me know that there was a report of a homicide. And it was odd because the complainant came to the front counter, which is, it doesn't happen all the time.
In order to verify the girl's statements, Constable Sean Phillips is dispatched to the boat to look for evidence. The event supposedly took place on board a boat belonging to the teenager's father. It's moored at the Nanaimo Port Authority Marina, which is called the Boat Basin. Glenn Forsley interviews the girl and her mother. Some new details emerge.
I don't know whether she really wanted to be there. I think it was more of a situation where the mom wanted to get to the bottom of things, because from what I understand is that the daughter did not come home immediately that night. So there were some questions about where were you, what were you doing, who were you with? And then finally, it was during the morning or the early afternoon that the daughter said to the mom, stop harassing me, stop bothering me. This is what actually happened. I was present during a murder, and just lay off.
Forsley also learns that the 13-year-old girl was not alone when the event took place.
There was another girl on board the vessel. I believe she's approximately 14, 15 years old, and also a 16-year-old boy.
Also on board with the 3 teenagers are a 22-year-old man named Stephen Bosch and the alleged victim, an older homeless man whose name is unknown.
So at that point, the mom, there was some sense of being incredulous or not wanting to believe that their daughter was part of anything like that. So it was, the mother made the initial decision to send the father down to the boat. The father checked on the boat, found what he thought was some blood on the boat, and then the ball starts rolling.
Officer Phillips inspects the boat and confirms that there are signs of a struggle and bloodshed on board. Phillips immediately tapes off the area and the boat to prevent contamination of the crime scene.
He had essentially corroborated what the young girl had told the police so far. So we were looking at an incident which had occurred late Sunday evening or early Monday morning. And the circumstances were this young girl and also a friend of hers and also a young man were on this young girl's boat. And they had contact with a person who she described as being homeless. And through circumstances, this person was murdered on the boat, and his body was tossed overboard into the water just near the Nanaimo Boat Basin.
Nanaimo RCMP received a report from kayakers who discovered a dead body floating in the water south of the marina.
It was just located, I'd say, 1 or 2 kilometers south of the Nanaimo Boat Basin. It was floating near a log boom. This was just south of a mill located in the area. A canoeist was in the area when they happened upon the body. And at that point, I believe there was 2 individuals. So one of the canoeists stayed with the body, and the other went to shore to notify the police. The body was floating in the water, it was face down. It was fully clothed. We pulled the body onto the Harbor Patrol vessel, conducted a brief examination of the body with the forensic member, took some photographs.
Could the body match the description of the homeless man who was supposedly murdered on board the boat?
What I noted on the body was that it did display some severe wounds to the head area, upper torso. There was a defensive wound to one of the hands. The body was in full rigor mortis.
The police bring the body back to the marina, where the coroner and the RCMP forensic identification team are waiting.
There is nothing in the body that would help us identify it. There's no identification. But we were fortunate that one of the police officers present at the boat basin recognized the person as Mark Hanley. His fingerprints would have been on record and would have been something for us to compare it to. At that point, the body was sealed and taken to the morgue at the Nanaimo Regional Hospital, preparing it for an autopsy in the next few days.
The identity of the victim still needs to be formally confirmed by autopsy. Nanaimo is a small community, and the police recognize the victim as Mark Hanley.
Mr. Hanley was described by members of our office who were quite familiar with him, being homeless, as having substance abuse issues, drug addictions. He did frequent the downtown area, but there was another side to Mr. Hanley, that being a person who had a family, who had children, who had people that cared about him and loved him and wanted him to do better in life.
Investigators wait for the autopsy results and the formal identification of the victim. Glenn Forsley turns his attention to the boat at the marina. He looks for evidence that might connect the dead body to the alleged murder described by the 13-year-old girl.
It was a commercial dive boat, an aluminum, I'd say about 30 feet in length. It had an open deck on the back, a small wheelhouse, and inside the wheelhouse there would have been an area like you'd find in like a camper trailer, a stove and a bed, table setting, that kind of thing.
The Nanaimo RCMP forensic identification team has been at work on the boat since it was first reported earlier that day.
What was found on the boat was a substantial amount of blood, blood spray, blood spatter, that type of forensic evidence. We were told that through the girl that first attended the police office that all the rags, cleaning products were thrown either overboard as they were floating along, and there was also a suitcase that was on board, and either the suitcase was filled with these cleaning supplies or the suitcase was simply thrown overboard.
Forsley wants to interview someone who was working at the marina the night of the murder. Security guard Doug Bradford was on duty.
At that point, we spoke with one of the security guards or commissionaires that worked in the area and found out a little bit more about the boat and about the occupants of the boat.
There was a boat tied up illegally in the wrong spot. It shouldn't have been there. But there was nobody on board at the time. So I didn't pay any attention to it. A little while later, I'd say around midnight, 2 girls came up off the docks. And of course the docks are closed. And I asked them what they were doing down on the docks, and they said that they were off the dive boat. And then I guess it would be another hour, hour and a half, give or take. And they came back and they had 2 young lads with them. So immediately I knew where they were heading. They were heading down to the boat that was illegally parked. So I followed them down there. The only thing I saw as I approached the boat was the owner's daughter sitting at the back of the boat saying, "Here comes security." And then I went down and asked them why they were there, and you can't be there. A fella came out and said, "We'll move right away."
The security guard is certain that he didn't see anyone resembling the victim, but he does remember the suspicious behavior of the 4 teenagers on board.
They looked like they had their hands caught in a cookie jar. If I can't put it a better way than that, you've seen kids with their hands in a cookie jar and they're in trouble. And they were just nervous and agitated. Like as if they'd done something wrong, but I didn't know what it would be, other than they thought they were illegally parked, and they were scared that I might go down and check the boat.
The presence of Bosch and the other youths confirms what the 13-year-old witness reported. Bradford also says that he heard the boat leaving the marina later that evening.
About 3 o'clock in the morning, he felt it was heading out to the water from the pier. As far as seeing it or hearing anything else, that was it.
Corporal Forsley contacts the Nanaimo Port Authority to access footage from their video surveillance system at the marina. Is it possible that the crime has been captured on camera? In August 2008, a 13-year-old girl reports that she witnessed a murder earlier that morning aboard her father's boat at the Nanaimo Marina. RCMP forensic officers examine the boat and find blood and signs of a cleanup in the cabin. Later that day, kayakers report finding a body in the water 2 kilometers from the marina. Attending officers recognize the body as that of a homeless man named Mark Hanley. He is known to Nanaimo police. A security guard at the marina tells police he saw a group of young people on the boat late on the night in question. The marina is equipped with a sophisticated video surveillance system. Lead investigator Glenn Forsley gains access to footage of the crime scene.
We have cameras that cover a broader area, so it covers a little bit of the water. The ramps will certainly be covered. And we have over 30 cameras that are in operation at any one time. If you're walking through our area, there's most likely at some point you're going to be monitored.
In the end, we're provided with, I'd say, at least half a dozen different camera angles.
A police officer is assigned to screen the footage to see if the surveillance system captured the activities described by the security guard. Investigators begin to question the other juveniles that were involved in the crime. Corporal Sorab Rupa interviews a 14-year-old girl. She is a friend of the girl who made the initial report.
I think she was 14 at the time, but a mature 14, somebody who had been around and was aware of the world around her. She wasn't immature in any way. There was a lot of evidence that the elder of the 2 teenage girls gave that the younger one could not provide. So, essentially, from a witness point of view, the elder girl was, in my opinion, more instrumental in the case. So, on that particular day, I met with her twice. Once at the office where I interviewed her, and then the second time, later on the same day, I went down to the seawall in Nanaimo. I wanted some idea of what she was talking about and put some context to it as far as locations, angles, where things were parked, so that in any future discussion with her, I would know what she's talking about and I would have a very clear understanding of what she means.
With the girl's statement, the events of the evening aboard the boat become more clear.
The 2 girls had walked to a part of Nanaimo called Harewood, where they had met up with another male who was a friend of both of them. Along the way, they heard a male calling out to them, and this was Bosch, and he actually joined them, and they all walked back together. Bosch had some cocaine on him. The 2 young girls, along with their male friend, and Bosch arrived at the youngest girl's parents' boat. And the elder of the two girls and Bosch consumed the cocaine. Once the cocaine was done, they left the younger girl and her male friend on board the vessel, and they walked up to the underground parking area of the Nanaimo boat basin.
The girl then tells Corporal Rupa about meeting the victim, Mark Hanley, with Stephen Bosch near the parking garage.
Bosch and Hanley had a discussion, and the elder of the two girls who had been doing cocaine with Bosch went to the washroom. She came out of the washroom. She saw Bosch and Hanley walking down the finger of the dock and approaching the boat. So she ran down, and she was quite concerned about this male getting on board the boat. She was also concerned that for her friend, her other young friend, whose parents' boat it was, and she didn't want her to get into any trouble. There was some discussion about this male being allowed on the boat, and eventually Bosch, I guess, managed to win that discussion, and the male was invited onto the boat.
The girl describes how Stephen Bosch and Mark Hanley head straight to the cabin to consume their cocaine. She explains to Rupa that the atmosphere seems different now that the homeless man has joined the group.
Most of the cocaine is now consumed by Bosch. Hanley is sitting there, and he's making a crack pipe with a can. She does a bit of drugs with them, and she leaves because it looks like to her that things are going to get ugly, and she's a bit concerned about the way Bosch is behaving and the state Hanley is in. So she goes back to the back of the boat where her younger friend, her younger girlfriend, and their male friend are.
Corporal Rupa learns that the three teenagers stood helplessly on the stern and watched.
And at that point, the assault starts on Hanley by Bosch.
The girl says that after the attack, Bosch orders the girls to clean up the mess. They fearfully obey.
She's asked to help dispose of evidence off the side of the boat, and she does that. She did make a statement that when she was cleaning up the blood, she didn't do a very good job, and it was her intention specifically not to do a very good job so that some evidence would be left behind for the police to find. She was quite traumatized by the events, not only of what she witnessed, but also cleaning up a large amount of blood in the boat. And I guess fearing for her own safety and that of her young girlfriend and the other male, and being trapped on a boat, it adds a certain dimension to your own fear.
The girl tells Corporal Rupa that Bosch ordered the 16-year-old boy to drive the boat out of the marina. They travel for some time and then dump the body and the evidence into the ocean.
They came back to Nanaimo late in the morning. They parked the boat, and they all split up and went their own ways, and Bosch had threatened them to not tell anybody as to what had occurred.
The young girl's incriminating testimony validates the statements made by her girlfriend. Corporal Rupa must decide if they are telling the truth.
She was displaying all the key components that register with me as somebody telling the truth, in the way she detailed out the events and the way her memory worked. It didn't strike me as being false in any way.
So after speaking with this second girl, we defined people's roles a little bit better and centralized more in Mr. Bosch having the responsibility of the murder.
With Rupa's conclusions, Glenn Forsley decides that he must move quickly to arrest the primary suspect, Stephen Bosch, before he disappears.
Later on in the day, we had established surveillance on Mr. Bosch at his residence, and we're in the process of getting ready to arrest him.
At the Royal Columbian Hospital in New Westminster, British Columbia, Dr. Craig Litwin has completed the autopsy of Mark Hanley. His report is forwarded to the RCMP.
The injuries that were of most significance with regards to identifying what happened to Mr. Hanley and what led to his cause of death were that there were blunt force injuries to his head. That is to say, injuries caused by the application of blunt force to, of course, the head region, resulting in injuries to the skin, to the bone, and to the brain.
Mark Hanley would likely have died from his head injuries, but there is some evidence that he was still alive when he was thrown into the water.
So depending upon the circumstances, water introduces an added layer of complexity to the postmortem examination and to the determination of why the person died. When a person goes into the water, they initially, and they are alive, there's an attempt to struggle to keep their head above water, and as they go under the water and are less able to continue breathing, they can begin to swallow large amounts of water. There's often an attempt to gasp each time they break the surface of the water, and as a result, you can often see the lungs overfilled with air because they're simply trying to breathe in as much air as possible.
I believe water was found in his stomach, not his lungs. So it would lead someone to believe that this person was still alive while they were floating in the water and they had ingested water.
It's not possible to determine the cause of death, but there is no doubt that Mark Hanley's murder was very violent. It's clear to investigators that this is a case of manslaughter, but a statement made by the 13-year-old witness could be evidence of a higher charge.
One of the girls alleged that there was some type of history between Mr. Hanley and Stephen Bosch. There was mention of a contract or some kind of communication by cell phone that Bosch was to harm Hanley due to a drug debt.
According to the 13-year-old girl, Stephen Bosch received a text message that night directing him to kill the victim.
The initial theme is that Bosch planned this all along, and someone was directing or ordering Bosch to harm Hanley.
This information could prove Bosch premeditated the crime. That could increase the charge against him from manslaughter to first-degree murder. Corporal Forsley serves a warrant to search Stephen Bosch's apartment. Bosch is gone, but they talk to his roommate.
Mr. Bosch obviously was uncomfortable with what had occurred. So he had told several people what he had done after the offense. You can call them disclosure witnesses. They had received some type of information from Bosch that he had done something bad. We knew that there was a large amount of forensic evidence on board. You'd have to assume that some of this blood or forensic material might have landed on him. He would have had contact with it. Priority was to conduct a search warrant on his house in the hopes of obtaining any clothing that was associated to him or that he had worn on the night of the offense, or any other material that might have been taken, because we know that Mr. Hanley did arrive at the boat with a quantity of cocaine. There might be some kind of residue left over just to corroborate what the witnesses had told us.
Corporal Rupa meets with the third witness in the case, a 16-year-old boy. Police suspect he may have helped Bosch dispose of Hanley's body.
He was hesitant to give us a statement. So I had to assure him that at this point it was strictly a witness statement to figure out from his perspective what had occurred that night. He then provided a statement to us that was very similar to what the two young girls told us.
Corporal Forsley has suspicions about the witness's statement. He thinks the young man is minimizing his involvement in the crime.
The young male was part of throwing Mr. Hanley overboard. So that was a concern. That was a red flag right away in regards to how do we treat this person? We can't be totally naive in regards to thinking that he had no involvement at all, but we couldn't assume how willing of a role this teenage male had. Was he coerced in doing it? Did he act freely? Was it more of a situation where he's being directed by the adult to throw Hanley overboard?
The statements from the two girls seem to exonerate the 16-year-old, but investigators are reluctant to draw the same conclusion about his role in the crime. With mounting evidence against Stephen Bosch, investigators decide to interview him. But Bosch has disappeared. Where could he be hiding? Has he already left British Columbia? The investigation into the murder of Mark Hanley continues. His body was found floating in Nanaimo Harbor in August 2008. Statements from 3 juvenile witnesses describe a brutal attack and murder on a boat in the marina the night before. Lead investigator Glenn Forsley obtains videotape from the Nanaimo Marina's surveillance system. His team has to scan more than 100 hours of footage. Corporal Rupa interviews a 3rd witness, a juvenile male, but investigators don't believe that he is being completely truthful. The manhunt to find the prime suspect, Stephen Bosch, is in full swing.
We had sent members out to areas that we know where he was living. We had gone to Bosch's parents' house. He wasn't there anymore.
Investigators receive a tip that says Bosch may be staying with a friend in Parksville. It's a suburb a few kilometers north of Nanaimo. Glenn Forsley and Sorab Rupa investigate.
From the moment the incident was reported to when he was arrested was less than 3 days.
Bosch is arrested in Parksville and brought back to Nanaimo. Glenn Forsley takes his time to prepare for the first interview with the prime suspect.
You're essentially trying to find out what makes this person tick, what he likes, what he doesn't like. We do the best that we can. So it wasn't until later on that afternoon that we were prepared to interview Stephen Bosch.
Corporal Rupa asked the 14-year-old girl to reenact the events that took place on the boat on that tragic night.
So on August 8th, I met up with the elder of the 2 young girls, and I had along with me another investigator from our forensic identification section. I have found in my experience, witness reenactments serve a tremendous purpose as far as gathering better and more credible evidence from the witness.
The boat remains a secure crime scene since the evening of the murder.
Essentially, I gave her free rein to tell me what actually happened on that boat. And it was excellent because she was pointing out evidence that we had previously not known about. She could point out things within the cabin that were critical to us. A can that the victim had twisted to make a crack pipe, white powder, which was cocaine, on a CD case that would have been from the victim, things of that nature. As a result of her reenactment, I ended up seizing additional exhibits that had not been seized when the scene was processed. Another very important thing from an investigative purpose that I found in that reenactment was where the male, the young male, their friend was when Bosch pushed the victim Hanley over. And just the way she explained that, it was so spontaneous that it was credible in what she said to me.
Corporal Forsley begins questioning Stephen Bosch about the evening, but he is not very cooperative. Then Forsley tells him they've interviewed the 3 juvenile witnesses.
I interviewed him approximately 4 hours. And it wasn't until, let's say, about an hour and a half into the interview that he eventually started talking about the incident himself. He was remorseful for what had occurred. He couldn't describe his actions in regards to how it got so bad so fast. He blamed a lot on the drug usage, which could be used as a crutch. That was okay with me as long as he wanted to talk about the incident.
The first reenactment with the 14-year-old girl convinces Rupa that she can be more helpful to the investigation. another reenactment is organized.
On August 11th, we took her on a police boat to try and identify where on the night of the homicide they had actually traveled to. She had told me that they had been disposing of evidence when they were out on the ocean.
Among the objects thrown overboard are an old suitcase stuffed with rags used to clean the crime scene. But the witness is never able to pinpoint where the murder weapon was discarded. The interrogation of Stephen Bosch continues, but Corporal Forsley realizes he will need to be more forceful to get details from him about the murder of Mark Hanley. Will Stephen Bosch admit to following orders from a drug dealer to settle a debt with Hanley? Could the 13-year-old witness have lied about the text message that Bosch received? Mark Hanley is found dead. His murder is reported by a young girl just hours before the discovery of the body. After a 3-day manhunt, the suspect, Stephen Bosch, is arrested. A second witness, another young girl, describes the events in 2 reenactments on board the boat where the murder took place. Her cooperation is a great help to the investigation. Lead investigator Glenn Forsley interrogates the suspect for several hours, but he is not cooperative. The youngest witness claims that Bosch received a text message that instructed him to murder Mark Hanley. When Forsley presses Bosch to talk about the fight in the cabin of the boat, the interrogation becomes more intense.
I started interrogating or questioning him hard in regards to his side of it, that the interview became confrontational because I was told things by other witnesses that might be diametrically opposed to what he had told us. So, of course, I'd have to find the truth. I can't just accept someone's word as gospel. It wasn't until the end of the interview that I had to discuss these areas that conflicted with Bosch's information that became more adversarial.
Bosch now claims he acted in self-defense because Hanley had attacked him. He blames his actions on his state of intoxication.
He described Hanley as either overdosing or becoming overly aggressive. And one thing led to another, and there was some type of confrontation about the cocaine. Hanley tried to take Bosch's cocaine. Bosch tried to protect his drugs, and Hanley stabbed Bosch in the hand or in the finger with a hypodermic needle. A hypodermic needle was never found on board. Numerous items were discarded by all the occupants of the boat. So who's to say whether there was or there wasn't? But that was Bosch's version of it, is that he felt that he was provoked. Bosch reacted overly aggressively. He says he lost it. He said he blacked out, but he recalled grabbing a wrench that was in and around the wheelhouse and then hitting Hanley repeatedly. I remember asking Bosch, how many times do you think you hit him? And I believe he said more than 10. Mr. Bosch told us that it was a long spanner or wrench. He described it as being approximately 2 feet in length, so a fairly substantial piece of metal. Also, a spike or a long screwdriver-like device was used on Mr. Hanley. During the autopsy, the pathologist had located wounds that were consistent with stab wounds on his body. The girls went so far as to saying that the beating occurred inside the wheelhouse, and they were able to see a snapshot of what was happening through a window that was on the door to the wheelhouse. The other teenage male was present when this was happening.
After the assault finishes, Bosch comes out and asks the male to help him. And the young male gets up and goes to help and essentially drives the boat out in the harbor, at which point Bosch disposes of what we are led to believe is a wrench. And that is most likely the actual murder weapon that was used in the assault. Once they leave the harbor area, once again, Bosch asks the young male to help him in disposing of the body. The young male helps Bosch, and they bring the male out. And he's pushed overboard.
Instinctively, Mark Hanley grabs the railing in an attempt to survive. That's when Stephen Bosch intervenes one last time.
There is a strike given, according to her, at one point, because the male is still clinging on after being pushed over the side of the boat. When the strike is given by Bosch, the young male has actually stepped back from the victim.
Mark Hanley slowly sinks into the waters of Nanaimo Harbor. The three teenagers are in shock from witnessing the violence.
They witness a horrific event. To kill somebody with a wrench is not an easy thing, and there's going to be a lot of pain and yelling and screaming involved. And then to witness that, followed by the disposal and then the cleanup, these kids were definitely impacted.
Bosch agreed or accepted responsibility for doing the majority of the amount of damage to Hanley.
In order to charge Bosch with murder, the prosecutors must prove that there was premeditation. The text message that the 13-year-old witness described could provide that proof.
The young girl had initially told Constable Sean Phillips that Bosch had received some type of communication, I believe it to be a text message, telling Bosch or directing Bosch to harm Hanley.
Bosch confesses to his role in the offense, but strongly denies receiving a text message to harm Hanley. Bosch is held in custody while he awaits formal charges. The police have spent days screening the footage from the marina surveillance system. It provides good evidence, but falls short of capturing the murder.
It didn't show us the incident, which is unfortunate because it was a little too far away from the camera, but we were able to establish what time the girls left the boat and what time Hanley arrived on the boat, and then what time they arrived after disposing of the body.
Investigators have built a strong case against Stephen Bosch, but Forsley is not satisfied. He would still like to find the murder weapon. Glenn Forsley requests the RCMP dive team to be assigned to the case. The divers used the information gathered by Corporal Rupa from the reenactments to define a search area.
So they set these markers out, which would incorporate that target area, and so they began searching there. Good visibility, shallow water, so they had a considerable amount of time at the depth there.
The dive team attempts to find the wrench that was used as the murder weapon. They also try to locate the suitcase full of rags and supplies that were used to clean the cabin. The area of interest is quite large, and the team uses a technique called sledding to cover the area.
There are two boards that are joined in the center by a pipe. They're 1 foot by 4 feet, and there's two divers down at a time, and they're towed by a topside boat, which will dictate the search pattern. So all the divers really have to do is hang on to the boards, and the boat will tow them. And where the benefit is there, that the divers aren't working, they're just hanging on, so air consumption is minimal, and depending on the visibility, large areas can be searched in shorter periods of time.
The recovery team works underwater for nearly 8 hours, but comes up empty-handed. The murder weapon is lost in the waters of Nanaimo Harbor. Forsley searches through Bosch's cell phone records for evidence of the text message that the 13-year-old witness described.
Something about a debt being owed for drugs, and that Hanley was to be killed over this debt.
If Bosch has indeed received a text message to kill Hanley, the prosecution can upgrade the charge against him to first-degree murder.
We didn't know the numbers all the numbers that would have been involved, but all the basic ones, we covered the bases, but you can't account for numbers that you don't know about. So all the ones that we knew were associated to, let's say, Hanley or to Bosch, there was nothing like that. Some carriers don't have the memory in their system to have the actual text. They might only supply dates and times.
During the preliminary hearing, the 13-year-old witness drops a bomb. She says that Stephen Bosch never received a text message ordering him to kill Mark Hanley. She lied to the police from the beginning.
It wasn't the truth. Why the girl used that, I don't know. Maybe it was just to get some credibility to the story. Maybe she felt she wasn't being believed until she threw out this nugget that there was something a little bit more to it. But that's what we were told.
There are two major setbacks for the case. The evidence that would prove premeditated murder doesn't exist, and a key witness has lied and lost her credibility. Does the prosecution still have enough evidence for a jury to convict Bosch of first-degree murder? Mark Hanley's brutally beaten body is recovered from the Nanaimo harbor. Hours before the discovery of his body, a 13-year-old girl reports the crime to the RCMP. Two other young witnesses come forward. The second young woman proves to be an asset to the investigation. After disappearing for several days, the suspect, Stephen Bosch, resurfaces and is apprehended in Parksville. The prosecutors abandon the charge of first-degree murder after discovering that the 13-year-old witness lied about a text message that would prove premeditation. In June of 2010, the murder trial for Stephen Bosch begins. The prosecution enters a charge of second-degree murder due to a lack of evidence that would prove the crime was premeditated. First and second-degree murder can result in the same sentence. However, historically, second-degree murder convictions result in lighter sentences. The young witnesses have become uncooperative during the 2 years since the murder.
They were reluctant to be involved in the process from the onset, and to ask a teenager to be involved in a court process and having to testify at trial and point fingers and stand by to what they say, it goes against the code. I can't rat people out, I can't tell on someone else, I can't be a tattletale. So it was very difficult.
It will be particularly difficult for the 13-year-old witness who admitted to lying about her statement.
So you're dealing with that use credibility right off the start. So their credibility is damaged. They've shown that they're capable of lying to the police and also mislead the courts as well. So obviously there's going to be some reluctance because it would be a hostile environment for a witness that has lost their credibility when faced with a defense counsel.
After several weeks, the defense offers the prosecution a guilty plea for involuntary manslaughter. With the case weakened by difficult witnesses, the Crown prosecutor weighs the chances of convincing a jury and decides to accept the defense's offer.
He was sentenced 8 years, and he was convicted of manslaughter.
The outcome of the trial was right, in that we convicted a person of manslaughter based upon all the evidence that we could get out at trial. And I've got to be clear about that. It's what the evidence is at trial. It's not about, in many instances, what occurred, because they can be two separate things completely. And what occurs at trial is what the witnesses say and the evidence they give. And it's their moment, it's their day, and they're on the stand. And trials are made or lost depending upon what witnesses stay on the stand.
I would have liked to see a conviction for murder. But I think at the end of the day, we had the best outcome that we could have gotten under the circumstances.
Water can reveal evidence, and it can conceal evidence. For Mark Hanley, the waters of Nanaimo Harbor revealed his body, but concealed the evidence that could have convicted his murderer on a higher charge.